program. The complete bios of our panelists are in your forum programs, so I'll provide only a brief introduction. Our guests today are nearly synonymous with Ohio politics. In alphabetical order, they are. Our first panelist is chair of the Ohio Republican Party. He held the position from 1988 to 2009 and has recently been reelected. It's Groundhog Day. Bob Bennett. Our next speaker has been chair of the Ohio Democratic Party since 2005. He also served in the House of Representatives and was minority leader. Please welcome Chris Redfern. And as our moderator, our very own Mike Thompson, director of WOSU Public Media, member of our board, and chair of the program committee. Michael, come on up. On behalf of CMC and the political season sponsors, the Farm Bureau, Hannah News Service, and Jeffrey Company, as well as Ice Miller. Mike, this is your panel. Have at it.
Thanks very much, Rich. You know, I'm actually on the program committee, so we were looking for moderators for this event, and I actually was the backup moderator. You know, with all the turmoil that's happened with both the Democratic and Republican parties over the past year, changes in leadership, bruised egos, hard feelings, a lot of emotional stress. Dr. Phil was our first choice, but he couldn't make it, so I'll do my best. Anyway, so Bob Bennett, after the departure of Kevin DeWine, you're back in your old job, in the words of Dr. Phil. How's that going for you?
Pretty good. Everything's calm and quiet. We're restaffing, and everything's working out pretty good, Mike.
You know, there was some wounds there. Are they starting to heal? Are you starting to bring the party back together? Are there hard feelings being erased?
You know, I think President Obama's helped bring the party together, so I don't have to worry about that. The staffing is, we lost some good people to the campaigns, and at the same time, we're reloading. Matt Borges is our new executive director. He started this week, and he's been on the ground running and doing a good job. So we're starting to put the senior staff together. We have a new finance director, and I think, you know, within the next week or so, we'll probably have everything in place.
Chris Redfern, Kevin DeWine, you know, his party under his leadership won the governor's office, Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office, big gains in Congress. He's not here, you are. What's your secret?
Should ask Doug Price.
How are things in the Democratic Party? Are they getting back together?
Getting back together?
Well, there was some angst there for a while there.
We're doing quite well. Appreciate your concern. Mike, you a registered Democrat? Or?
I'll never tell.
We're doing all right. It's the largest state party in the nation. We're proud of the work we've done over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, bringing about a two-party system here in Ohio that frankly was lacking during most of the time that Bob was chairman of the Republican Party. I've spent some time getting to know Mr. Bennett, Chairman Bennett, both in
History tends to repeat itself in politics.
We beat him up pretty good in 2006. We beat him up in 07, beat him up in 08 and 09. I hope Bob's up for another beating in 2012 and beyond.
You missed 2010 there.
No, it's 2012, Mike.
Okay, no, but you skipped it there.
Good to see you.
Anyway, all right, enough of the inside baseball. Bob Bennett, on my show, after the nomination was pretty much secured by Mitt Romney, I asked the Republican panelists one question every week for about 3 weeks. Terry Casey got this question. Are you happy with your nominee for president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think he will appeal to not only the social conservatives and the fiscal conservatives and the Tea Party people within the party, but I think that he'll be able to reach out and attract a number of independents. And those independents that some of them that broke for Obama in 2008, if you go into the suburbs and you go into some of our rural areas, you'll find out that he's lost that support, and so we're kind of looking forward to this. Is going to be an election that's going to be more like 2004 than 2008, and it's going to be you know, getting every vote to the polls and your ground game. So I know that Democrat Party was bragging on their ground game in 2010, but I don't know what happened to it. It just kind of disappeared on Election Day. It certainly didn't produce enough votes, so.
Kevin DeWine,
Chris Redfern.
Chris Redfern.
Doing a little projecting there, aren't
I
you?
thought it
I
was
know.
gonna be all right, you know.
You're going to chase this poor guy to the exit and keep it up. Come on, Bob, it's okay.
Chris Redfern, I'm sorry.
Okay, Bob.
Looking back over the 3+ years, 3.5 years of President Obama's term, are you completely satisfied with the job he's done?
Oh, absolutely, but don't take my word for it. Visit the third shift of General Motors up at the Youngstown plant, or take a walk down Toledo and meet some neighbors and family members who have been affected by Jeep and the resurgence of Chrysler. Spend some time with more than 280 supply chain businesses headquartered right here in the state of Ohio that, by their own admission, would not exist today in the strength that they've exhibited had the president not interceded on behalf of America's taxpayer and extended short-term loans to 2 of the big 3 to continue a strong and robust manufacturing industry here in the state of Ohio. We can say a lot of things about Barack Obama or Mitt Romney. We're all entitled to our opinions, but we are not entitled to our own sets of facts. And the fact is that today in this country, the Mahoning Valley and the city of Youngstown lead in manufacturing jobs created and retained under this president. Similar anecdotes can be repeated over and over as we go across the state of Ohio, whether it's Toledo or Youngstown, whether it's Parma, whether it's here in Columbus. The fact of the matter is the president's leadership and the leadership of those who joined him in the Congress have meant that more Ohioans are working today than there were in January in 2009 when his hand came off the Bible. There are more Ohioans today covered by health care than there were when the president's hand came off the Bible. And I think we should all celebrate that, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans.
Bob Bennett, the government bailout of General Motors and Chrysler, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a bad thing, because Obama believes that you let government control the economy, and instead of letting the free market control the economy. The fact of the matter is that in Ohio we've created roughly 1,680 new automobile jobs. Unemployment, and there are more people unemployed today than when Obama took office in 2009. So if you look at it, we've created more jobs. If you look at the job that John Kasich has done as governor, we created 23,000 healthcare jobs in Ohio, so we diversified the economy to a greater extent than we ever had before. Manufacturing jobs are important, and there's no question about it. And Youngstown is benefiting from the shale gas recovery operations that are going on right now, and I think that we'll continue to do that, and that's a good thing. But again, that's the diversification that we need in Ohio. But the fact of the matter is there's more people unemployed in Ohio today than when Obama took office.
So let me ask a question about the Obama-Kasich recovery here in Ohio. Bob Bennett, who gets more credit, the president?
Well, I'm sure that
government?
Obama wants to take credit for everything that happens in Ohio, but he also should take credit for what's happening in California, where they're going bankrupt, and in his own state. If it wasn't for California being in such sad shape, we'd be talking about Illinois right now, because they're bankrupt also. So I think that, yes, governors play a great role in that, and I think that Governor Kasich has done an outstanding job here in not only eliminating the deficit of $8 billion, but also as having a diversification in our economy that provides more jobs and will continue to provide jobs. If you look at what's happening, again, in California and Illinois, Obama has to take credit for that too.
Chris Redfern, how much credit should John Kasich get for the increase in manufacturing jobs and overall jobs?
Well, he'll take credit for the Indians being up 4 games in the American League Central if John Kasich gets the chance to grab a microphone, and perhaps he will. But regardless of the fact that the president owns the economy, as we know, and over the course of the last 3 years under his leadership, there's been a steady decrease in unemployment, not just here in Ohio, but across the country. I mean, those are the facts. We can disagree on our opinions, and we can characterize or try to mischaracterize positions as political leaders, and oftentimes, sadly, that happens. But in this case, we have the facts, and we can just lay them on the table and examine the facts. The first month that the president took office, there were 750,000 lost jobs just that month. Now, we can say the president's responsible for a lot of things, but when you take office in the mid-January of 2009, it's really difficult to claim that the president was responsible for those lost jobs. But nonetheless, well, I'll cede the argument as long as my political opponents will see the argument that over the course of subsequent 35 months, that the steady improvement in the economy should be owned by the president. Physically, you could see John Kasich's disagreement with Mitt Romney when they appeared before that small crowd up at Otterbein a few weeks ago, when Mitt Romney was talking so negatively about the country and the state's unemployment rate and the economy. Literally, Governor Kasich was moving his chair away from Mitt Romney because the governor has a much different message. If you were to ask John Kasich today, and I wish, Joe Varden, you would, if he supported the president's initiative to extend short-term loans to the American automobile industry, specifically two of the big three, whether that was a wise move for Ohio in retrospect. It's just a simple question. I think the same question was asked of Republican President Richard Nixon when similar loans and guarantees were offered to the American rail industry. No one in this room questioned President Bush's leadership when he extended, on behalf of America's taxpayers, additional supports to the American airline industry in the days and weeks after September 11th. Yet this president, who I argue, is largely responsible, if not more so, for the resurgence of manufacturing jobs, specifically the American automobile industry in this state, in this region, in this country. My friends in the Republican Party have such short-term memories, and they are entitled to their opinions. They are just simply not entitled to their own sets of facts.
Bob Bennett, I'll let you respond.
Well, I think that if you look at General Motors right now, I think that they're on the hook to the taxpayers to somewhere in the neighborhood of 57. I mean, the price has to go up to $56 per share, and I think General Motors is trading around 30 right now. If you look at that, that's a pretty big hump to get over to pay back the taxpayers the money that they put into General Motors. Look, there was a procedure on the books, it's called bankruptcy, and if they'd have gone into bankruptcy, it's up to the bankruptcy court to restructure and help them out. You know, it's interesting to me that Ford Motor Company never had to go into bankruptcy, and they're doing real good. Chrysler went into bankruptcy. We gave them a big chunk of money, and where are they operating out of today? They're operating out of Canada, and they're owned by an Italian firm. So I think that if you look at that, were these wise investments? Was this a wise choice for the government to get involved? I don't think so. We have a free market economy. We pick and choose. We didn't bail out Lehman Brothers, but we certainly bailed out AIG and some of the other firms there. The president talks about beating up on Wall Street, and he's going to do this, that, and the other thing, but he goes there and raises millions of dollars for his campaign, not only from Wall Street, but from the people that he criticizes, like Bain Capital. It just doesn't make sense to me as this guy talks one way and does something else when he acts, and I think that that's what's affecting the American people. If you look at what happened to the president yesterday in Kentucky and Arkansas, I mean, he lost over half of the counties. Out of the 120 counties in Kentucky, the uncommitted won in 67 of the counties out of the 120. So the president didn't do too good. He fell below 60%, and he was virtually unopposed on the ballot. Same thing happened down in Arkansas. Same thing happened in, we have a prisoner in West Virginia that gets over 40% of the vote. The president has problems in the country, and people may be talking one way, but if you look at the underlying data and everything, the president's in real trouble come November.
Chris Redfern, in the issue of private equity, Bob Bennett mentioned his criticism of Mitt Romney as being head of Bain Capital and what happened back in the late 80s, early 90s, but yet the same week he goes to the Blackstone Group's head's home for a fundraiser. Is private equity good or bad for the economy?
Private equity is great for the economy, especially when it's available. What again, Bob, as an accountant, you should understand that when Chrysler and General Motors were contemplating their future, and President Bush was advocating for the American taxpayer, this is a great irony, isn't it? This kid from Port Clinton standing up here defending President Bush's support at the time for extending short-term loans to two of the big three, because that's all lost. And that is the fact. And the president at the time, President Bush, and his Treasury Secretary suggested that to go deeper into recession and allow great American manufacturers to slip away was not wise for the national economy. President Obama embraced that strategy. Now, that's all lost 3 or 4 years later, but those are the facts. Private equity is a great thing. It helps build our country as long as it is available. And anyone who is remotely associated with the business of equity, whether in the banking sector or in Wall Street, would tell you, would remind you that in the months of late 2008, early 2009, there simply was no private equity on a scale available to General Motors and Chrysler to ensure their survival. And with their survival, the more than 200 companies in this state, the 850,000 jobs in this state that are directly tied to the American automobile industry. I mean, those are just the facts. I'm put in the position of defending private equity because the facts are frankly on the president's side. Now, if I may correct the record as well, Mike, last night in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, President Obama received 5,000 more votes than Mitt Romney if you were to compare the turnout. President Obama was not challenged in a primary in the Commonwealth. Mitt Romney was. The now titular head of the Republican Party and the presumed nominee in Kentucky last night received, in the home of Rand Paul, 5,000 fewer votes than President Obama.
On the issue of private equity, should private equity firms, Bain, Blackstone Group, should they make money if the company they have invested in goes out of business and lays off their workers?
Those are the questions that shareholders and investors in those corporations and those companies have to ask themselves and ask their leaders. It's not me to pass my judgment from a personal standpoint. It's only in this case, my opportunity to offer an anecdote as it relates to middle-class families in Ohio. I grew up in Port Clinton, and like Chillicothe and Fremont and Bowling Green and Defiance, it was home at the time to Stage department stores, which were located, like in Port Clinton, on Main Street, in our case, Madison Street, downtown. By the leadership of Bain's own admission at the time, Stage, which had just recently at the time purchased Ullman's in the country, was making money. But it was not, according to Bain at the time, making enough money. So what Bain did was they parceled off the company and they sold it. And with it, they sold off hundreds of jobs in Northwest Ohio, thousands across the country. Now, was a profit made? Absolutely. But were questions asked then, as they should be asked now, about the leadership of Bain or any other company, including the company that bought Uniroyal Coated Fabrics in Port Clinton at the time? Yes, those questions should be asked. That's what makes our country such a great country, where stockholders and shareholders, where people can gather together in rooms just like this and put their hand up and ask their CEO if their values reflect the values of those who are impacted by their decisions in towns like Port Clinton.
Well, Bennett,
it's fundamental to the democracy.
Private equity, there's a downside when you invest in a company that's obviously troubled.
Look, it's not up to the government to pick winners and losers in a free enterprise system. In a free enterprise system, I mean, we have the greatest free enterprise system in the world. There are people that come here that invest every year, every day in American industry and in American technology. And one of the great things about the Americans, is about our economy, is we've reinvented ourselves over the years. If you look at 200-year history, moving from an agricultural economy into a manufacturing economy into today, which would be an information economy, if you look at the internet and the other social media programs, it's not up to the government to pick winners and losers when it comes to business. It's up to business to do that. And I'll get back to the automobiles again. There was a procedure, there is a legal procedure that they could have gone through and saved the same number of jobs without the government dictating whether they were going to put money in there. The fact of the matter is in the automobile industry, that the problems that were created for it in America were created over a period of 25 or 30 years. And we became non-competitive with the rest of the world. So that when it was cheaper to bring in an automobile from Japan or someplace else, or Europe, and sell it in America, and it was better quality and everything, that's what put a lot of our automobile manufacturers in trouble. Now, when there's a procedure to take care of that, it's not the government putting money in, taxpayers' money in there to bail them out. And I think that's what the argument is here right now. So
Healthcare.
disagreement.
We are approaching the beginning of June, and June is the month that the Supreme Court is set to release its ruling on President Obama's healthcare overhaul. Chris Redfern, what happens if it is overturned?
If I may digress and just offer up for a reminder that it was Governor Taft, a good Republican, who helped create the Third Frontier Fund. It was Governor Voinovich, Governor Taft, Governor Kasich, Governor Strickland, who continued, Speaker Davidson, through budgets that created or enhanced or improved tax credits, tax abatements, enterprise zones. I think we picked some winners and losers with those government-funded programs in the private sector, by the way. I think we picked some winners and losers. I read in the newspaper the governor's quite pleased that Bob Evans is going to stay in Ohio, as if it was going to leave. He's going to stay in Ohio, and he used publicly funded tools to keep Bob Evans. I think he picked a winner. I didn't read he offered the same to IHOP or Perkins Pancake House.
If you
So
eat
he
too
picked
much of
some
that
winners.
stuff, you end up in the hospital. So let's get back to
No, I want to get back to the facts.
healthcare. What happens if
Every
President
time,
Obama's healthcare overhaul is
including
overturned?
healthcare, every time Democrats cede the argument without pointing out the facts, we put ourselves in a position of weakness. The facts are, the Third Frontier Fund was essentially authored by then State Representative Nancy Hollister under the leadership of then Speaker Davidson and then Speaker Householder. Those are the facts. And Third Frontier has been used rightly over the course of these years to help small, medium-sized businesses and others compete and expand. Makes our state stronger and better.
I'm getting the feeling you don't
And
like
it's
to talk about
underwritten with
healthcare.
public dollars.
How about healthcare?
I think if you're a breast cancer survivor in this state, in this country, and we've been, all of us, Sally, have been affected by the challenges and the just tremendous pain that breast cancer brings to families. If you're a breast cancer survivor and you know that under the president's leadership, a law was passed that protects your health care if you were to change jobs today to tomorrow, and that health care, in this case pre-existing condition discrimination, was outlawed, I think we would see much more support. Because of the cumbersome nature of a large piece of legislation, it's difficult to tell those stories. If you're a graduating senior at Ohio State and you have a chronic illness, and you know, and your parents, as importantly, know that you can stay on their health care plan for a year or so as you transition into the marketplace, it's a very good thing. If you know, as I did, as a member of the Health Committee in the legislature for many years, and a member of the legislature, that health care is a cost driver in this state, and that the Ohio State University would not be expanding without public dollars to provide services that are challenging our economies. If we are able to bring those costs down over the long term, we will be a stronger country because of it.
Bob Bennett, healthcare, what happens if it is upheld by the Supreme Court?
We cannot have a
even this out,
treatment
Chris.
model versus a prevention
I got to
model.
give Mr. Bennett a chance here.
The voters in Ohio have already spoken on the Obama care plan, health care plan. That was last year where they overwhelmingly rejected Obama's health care plan. Look, health care is a major issue in this with every family, whether it's the cost of providing for that health care, whether it's the cost of insurance or anything else. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and the right way is to let the states decide how they're going to do it. And for the federal government to step in and say that they're a know-all, be-all, and that they know what's best for every American is just the wrong idea. Again, Obama thinks the government can solve all the problems. Instead of letting the free marketplace operate as it should and let the states do what they should do under the Constitution, which is they have the rights to do that. When it comes to investment in the third frontier and everything, you know, there's a cost-benefit relationship to the investment that the government makes in those. And they do get a return on that, whether it's the third frontier or anything else that government does, whether they give tax credits or anything else, is to create jobs to produce more income for Ohioans to have a better economy, and at the same time do that. I don't have a problem with that. That, again, is operated at the state level. It's not the federal government stepping in and picking winners and choosers, or losers.
Is Mitt Romney the best nominee that your party could have picked
Absolutely.
to campaign against health care? Since he did it in Massachusetts, it was quoted saying that
He
President
did
Obama
it
should
in
do this.
Massachusetts because it was, again, it was a state program. That if you look at what's happening in Massachusetts with a few tweaks and everything, is it appears to be working up in Massachusetts. So I haven't heard too many complaints about that. Again, you know, it's an individual state that provided the health care. It wasn't the federal government telling the states and everybody how to do it, and one plan fits everybody. So I think that Mitt Romney did the right thing when he was governor of Massachusetts, and I think subsequent events proved him correct on that.
Chris, a lot of Democrats think that President Obama didn't go far enough
Sure.
with health care.
And let me remind you, the Massachusetts model, by the way, is underwritten with federal dollars. You're aware of that, Bob?
Well, every health care plan in America is underwritten with federal dollars.
And I need you to say
okay?
that louder so everybody knows what you and I do.
Yeah, but it's also taxpayer dollars that are collected from the individual Americans through the payroll tax, through Medicare and the rest of them.
Right.
There's no question about that.
And for several years, you served on as a member of the board of directors of a major hospital in Northeast Ohio, and you saw as a cost driver that an emergency room treatment model drives businesses out, good core businesses out of cash.
When it becomes more acceptable for somebody to call for an ambulance service because they have a cold to go to the emergency room,
Right.
yes, it drives up costs. Again, because that's what the federal government says we will pay for under our health care costs, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid. Now,
So
if you, again, you know, you're not letting the private enterprise or
So-
private services come
Sure.
out and determine how to deliver those services. If you did, you would have more home health care that would be provided by the hospitals out in the community, and there are test cases that are taking place right now
We're
on that,
probably all familiar that
particularly in Cleveland.
we're probably all familiar that in this state there are more than 500 medical centers and hospitals spread across the state, and that less than 10% are funded or by a majority of more than 50% by private dollars. That the federal government, as the chief provider of resources to the healthcare system, not just in the state and this country, should have a seat at the table when crafting reforms and providing access to healthcare, so that we're not, in your words, picking and choosing winners. In this
But I
case,
think that
losers.
what you just
And it-
indicated is that the underemployed and unemployed in Ohio is greater than in other places, and therefore we have more people that are on Medicare and Medicaid right now
Y-
than
y-
any place else.
You believe that people who are without jobs outnumber those with jobs who don't have access to health care? It's precisely incorrect. The fact of the matter
I
is,
didn't say that.
the fact of the matter is if as the speaker did when she was a member of the legislature, if you widen the net as it comes to automobile insurance, if you widen the net, you have more participants, you drive down the costs, you increase competition. You can't turn the channel without 4 or 5 companies telling you that they want to sell you automobile insurance in Ohio, right? So why can't we use the same model for health care?
If you had a free enterprise system, you could use that model. However,
So the
you don't have it.
automobile insurance companies in this state and in this country just did it on their own? It's just not factually
Well,
correct,
the
with all due
government hasn't
respect.
stepped in to determine automobile insurance
All
to
right.
provide it yet.
It always comes back to the automobile. GM, Chrysler, the healthcare always comes back to the automobile. Let's move away from this stuff into the social issues. Bob Bennett, you know, your party, your nominee wants to focus on the economy, pure and simple, but these social issues keep coming back up. Contraception, at the State House, it's the heartbeat bill and abortion and things like that. Is the Republican Party drifting too far to the right from those conservative-minded independents that you need to win in November?
Look, to win in November, the Republicans need the social conservatives, we need the fiscal conservatives, we need the Tea Party people, and we need to reach the independents. The free thinkers that are thinking about the issues, that are unhappy with what's happening in Washington, unhappy with the Obama administration, and I mean, those are the people that are going to determine the outcome of the election this fall. It's pure and simple. This is a simple business. You get your people to the polls. If you look at the polls right now, and I know that Chris does every day, they're in trouble. They're in trouble with their constituency. They're in trouble on the campuses. If you look at what happened when Obama made his announcement at Ohio State with the empty seats, I think if you look at what happened to Joe Biden over there, where he had the protesters from the coal people, if you look at what happened yesterday with the filing of the lawsuits clear across America with the Catholic institutions that are upset under Obamacare health care because they're being forced to provide certain services that are against their religious principles. So
But the
I
polls
think
also show
if you
that
put all of this together, this is a constituency that you're going to be reaching out to and attracting in November as part of your coalition.
a large constituency is females, and these issues hurt Republicans among women. There's a gender gap, 7 to 10 points in most polls.
Well, I think that, you know, part of that had more to do with the primary process, and I think right now you'll find out that they're reaching across, and the women have the same concerns as men do when it comes to the economy. Jobs, whether their kids are going to have jobs or not have jobs in the future, whether they're going to be well-paying jobs. So I think that, I'll be very surprised if we have a gender gap if we aren't taking the majority of the women vote in November. Because I think the economy is going to be the driving factor in this whole election. It's not going to be anything else, not going to be the social issues. They're important. They're important as part of your coalition. But I think when it comes right down to it, people are going to ask themselves, am I better off today than I was 4 years ago? And you look at the promises that were made by the president, and almost every one of them have been broken.
Chris Redfern, are Democrats using these social issues as a distraction from the economy?
Bob hopes every day social issues won't matter. Can you imagine we're having
every day that they are.
We're having a debate about whether or not women should have access to contraception. Wow. Yeah, let's have the debate. Let's ask every Catholic in the room whether or not contraception should be made available in their health care policy. We win that debate. It's pure and simple. I want Terry to appear on your television show every Friday and talk about how contraception should not be included in health care policies. I want that debate because every step of the way they lose that debate. I want to have this debate about marriage equality. And Matt and I's agreement, at least from a quality standpoint, that marriage equality is a fundamental right guaranteed by the states, by the nation's Constitution. I want to have that debate. And frankly, I want to have the debate about the economy in the last 26 straight months of downturn in unemployment. I want to have the debate about whether or not George Bush was right when he was asked at a press conference if Osama bin Laden mattered. And he said he didn't spend a lot of time thinking about Osama bin Laden. I want to have the debate whether or not it was right for the president to engage through the United States military and our Navy SEALs and hold Osama bin Laden accountable. I want to have that debate. I want to have the debate whether or not health care should fundamentally be available not to just Bob and I, but to all of us, whether you live in the poorest county in this state or the richest. I want to have that debate because every time we engage in that debate, Democrats win. One of the ways that Bob will be able to mobilize young people on these campuses, one of the ways Bob will be able to mobilize women across this state is continue to look down upon the rights of those who wish that they had access to contraception, a fundamental question. We guarantee through health care policies the right for men to seek and acquire Viagra, but we don't allow women access to contraception. And we are having this debate in 2012. And Bob is asked rhetorically, I hope, Mike, whether or not he's pleased with his nominee. I am.
Bob?
I'm pleased with the matchup too. But you know, I never thought that the issue was whether women had access to contraception or not.
No.
I think the issue is whether Catholic institutions have to provide that through their insurance program. And in a free enterprise system,
Well, you
they
may
should be
remember the
able to pick and choose.
Rubio-Blunt amendment where we were going to say CEOs get to pick and choose based on their own moral beliefs. Which ones would you take away, Bob?
You know.
Which advantages to healthcare would a CEO in this room take away? Which one? The cost drivers? The testing for breast cancer? Access to certain kinds of chemotherapy that are not widely approved by health insurance providers? Which? Let's engage in that debate. It's a fundamental right.
The debate's going to be about the election. The election this fall is going to be about the economy, and it's going to be whether you're better off today than you were 4 years ago. It's as simple as that.
And for 850,000 Ohioans who are engaged in the American automobile industry, that's an answer that is easily provided to that question.
We're going to take questions from the audience in just a moment, so make your way to the microphone. My last question is, you all disagree on a lot of stuff. If you had to pick one issue, and it has to be a tough issue, it can't be like saving kittens, okay? If you had to pick one issue to compromise on, Bob Bennett, what would you be willing to compromise on to reach a bipartisan agreement, which I think most, except for the hardline partisans, would want in Washington? What's one issue you would compromise on?
I think the one issue that I think you can compromise on, because I think it goes to the future for our children and our grandchildren, American debt. If you look at the president's budget that he submitted this year and you project it out to 2016, this country would be $20 trillion in debt, with most of that debt being held by China. And I think that that's the one thing that frightens Democrats and Republicans in the Congress, that they may be able to come together on and try to at least attempt to resolve the debt issue, because it's just too important as we move forward.
To follow up, you would consider tax increases as well as
Well,
spending cuts?
I think, you know, if there's a grand plan, I think that, you know, Democrats always want to, first thing that they want to do is increase taxes. They don't want to look at the spending side at all. But I think that, I think this is such an important issue that you asked me on a bipartisan basis who could come together. I wouldn't take anything off the table, but I certainly wouldn't put tax increases as the first item that you're going to be talking about.
Chris Redfern, pick an issue.
I think there's loopholes that you can eliminate without tax increases.
Loopholes.
Pick an issue you'd compromise on.
Localize it, if I may, and point out Governor Kasich's leadership in vetoing a bill that was widely panned by both Democrats and Republicans that would have allowed essentially the unregulated removal of water from Ohio's Great Lake, Lake Erie. When Governor Taft, Governor Voinovich, and a nice, humble, modest kid from Port Clinton, myself, can agree that that is an atrocious piece of legislation that Governor Kasich vetoed 6 months ago, I think we're on the right track. I hope he vetoes a similar piece of legislation. So there's an example where there was bipartisan support that I supported, at least at a local level. If I may, again, President Obama's spending binge never happened. President Reagan, during the years 1982 to 1985, laugh, the facts are what they are. MarketWatch.com, by the way, no liberal bastion there, in an article May 22nd, 2012, of all the falsehoods told about President Barack Obama, the biggest whopper, Bob, is the one about his reckless spending spree. As would-be President Mitt Romney tells it, I will lead us out of this debt and spending inferno. Under President's leadership, President Reagan in 82 to 85, and again 86 to 89, President Bush, number one, 90 to 93, President Clinton twice, President Bush twice, led President Obama by sometimes quadruple, if not more so, annualized growth in federal spending. President Reagan, for instance, Mike,
We got to get to questions from the audience.
we wouldn't
I
want
know
the
you wanna hear
facts.
from the audience. Bob?
President Reagan increased spending 8.7%. Under
Bob?
President Obama, 1.4.
Real quick rebuttal, then I'll get to questions from the audience.
The article's
I mean, this is amazing. I don't know where this article comes from,
It's
but
right
I mean,
here if you want to look at it.
look at trillion dollar budget deficits. Okay,
What's
that's
that
all
mean?
I have to say. You know.
All right.
It's like the Columbus Dispatch saying there's an $8 billion deficit. Saying it don't make it so.
Let's get to questions from the audience. Remember, we are on television, so if you are running from the law, or if your spouse or your boss does not know you're here, and you don't want to be on ONN or on the web, don't come up to the microphone. And please, no speeches. Go ahead.
Is it on? Oh, yeah, sorry. So my name is Christy Meyer. I'm from the Ohio Environmental Council, and want to thank you for your mention of the Lake Erie bill, and we hope that the governor vetoes that bill as well. But my question is more around the environmental issues, obviously, and something that you both haven't touched today. In 2004, President Bush declared the Great Lakes a national treasure and charged the US EPA with putting together a plan to restore the Great Lakes. In 2010, in 2011, and 2012, Congress delivered federal funds to restore the Great Lakes. This is a bipartisan effort. And so my question to both of you is, going forward, either one of the candidates, would they continue to work with Congress to put forward funds to restore the Great Lakes, which we know is an issue across Ohio that gets bipartisan support?
Bob Bennett?
I think, I think that bipartisan support will continue. If you look at the makeup of the Congress around the Great Lakes, as I think, you'll continue to have funding to restore the Great Lakes. I think also to address the problem of the carps coming in from Chicago, which the president has ignored, which would almost destroy the entire fishing industry, or at least the tourist portion of the fishing industry, not only in Ohio, but in the other Great Lakes. So, the president has ignored the calls for putting up the barriers to keep them from coming in from the Mississippi River. But as far as restoring the Great Lakes, as you know, that also takes the cooperation of Canada. And I think that Congress will continue to have bipartisan support on it. And I think that Mitt Romney certainly has indicated his support for it.
I grew up on Lake Erie. It's who I am. It defines me. I dare say I've spent more time on Lake Erie than I have anywhere else. It is, as Bob knows, on a personal level. He and I have a great appreciation for Lake Erie. For me, I understand it's the bedrock of the economy across the counties of northern Ohio, and everything must be done to protect not only the lake, but its watershed, its tributaries, as well as the other remaining Great Lakes. I believe that Mitt Romney and his friends who will support him and try to elect him will not be as supportive of using federal tax dollars to support or to defend and improve the life, the ecological life of the lake. I don't think it's self-serving of me to say that. I think you need to look at who one surrounds themselves with when they're trying to seek support. Bob brings up the president has sought financial support from some equity managers, private equity managers, and he's troubled by it. I am troubled equally by the fact that the Koch brothers and others who own businesses and do well are aligning themselves with Governor Romney, not because they're necessarily bad people. It's because their values are different than mine in terms of protecting Lake Erie. And that's how I will make my decisions. And that's how I would invite people who are thus far undecided as to who they'll support. Look at who one surrounds themselves with and how they'll govern, how they have governed, and make your decisions accordingly.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Al Gobble. I'm chairman of Blue Dublin, a grassroots organization. And I'd make one correction. China owns 16% of our debt, not the preponderance of the debt. I'd like to have you enumerate the taxes that President Obama has increased, and I'd like to remind you where the national debt came from. And I'll just tell you, these are accurate figures. There's no disputing them. The Bush tax cuts caused an increase of $3.6 trillion. The bailout that Bush started cost $1 trillion.
Let's get an answer, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Bennett.
Well, I got some others.
I know, but we want to get to some answer, and we got other folks who want to ask questions. Go ahead, sir. How much of the deficit is the responsibility of the previous administration, George W. Bush?
Well, I'll read you the
No,
numbers.
I want Mr. Bennett to, sir.
I'll read you the numbers.
Well,
The numbers are the Medicare bill of 05 cost $1 trillion, and on and on and on.
exactly.
And half of the national debt was
Sir, we have to
caused
move
by the
on. Sir,
Republican
we have to move on.
administration.
Bob Bennett, I'd like you to answer the question.
Well, I think that, the gentleman here is tax cuts by themselves without spending reductions, can create debt, as we well know. And what I'm saying is there's a failure on Congress, on the part of Congress, to reduce spending. And there's plenty of waste in federal government. We all know that. The problem is that if you don't have a trigger that's going to give them the courage to reduce that spending, and the wasteful spending, we're not talking about the things that are important to national defense and the rest of it, but the wasteful spending, then you're going to continue to create debt. And I submit to you that the largest purchaser of our debt right now is China. Whether it's 16% of the debt, they're rapidly going from 0 to 16%, and they'll continue on.
Chris
I
Redfern?
think Al also
Because
asked,
nobody else has the dollars to purchase the debt.
I think Al also asked whether or not you could remind us which taxes President Obama actually increased. He also, if I may, paraphrase his question, your answer. You suggested they, the members of Congress, should have the courage to stop wasteful spending. Tell us what that means specifically so that we could arrive at a total of $8 trillion, I think, in wasteful spending in the federal government?
I think it's very simple. I think you
Anything
go back to
specific?
zero-based accounting on budget, go back to zero-based budgeting and start from scratch.
With the exception
And
of the
that's what you
military?
have to do.
You're going to include the
know.
military?
No, I think you have to include the military too. I don't think the military has been taken off the table by anybody, but at the same time, you got to continue to fund the military so that you have a strong military. But I think that there are things that they can
Social
look at within
Security.
in the military that can cut it.
Social
As
Security,
I think
Medicare?
Social Security will be fine as we move forward, with very few changes in it. So I don't think that we're going to frighten the older people that are on Social Security. As I think, you have Medicare cost problems, but again, you have a spending problem on that side too with waste and fraud. So you got to eliminate that.
As we
You
wait
got
for
to
the
take a
next
look
question.
at it, and as government becomes more transparent and more accountable through social media and through the internet, I think you're going to find that more people are going to be questioning some spending in those areas.
You need to review Economics 101.
Sir, we're going to move on.
Keynesian-
We're going to kill the
Keynesian
mic,
economics.
please. Kill the mic, please.
You get out of a hole
Sir,
by...
we have to move on. We have to give somebody else a
You get out
chance.
of a hole by allowing people to
Thank you. While he's
earn money.
Chris Redfern, would you accept, what levels of Medicare spending cuts would you be willing to agree to reach a budget deficit cutting deal? I mean, would it be raising the age, increasing taxes, Medicare taxes, cutting benefits? You mentioned defense spending is off the table. Would Democrats be willing to put Medicare on the table?
No, I am opposed, although I'm not a member of Congress, certainly. Although Bob wrote a column once suggesting I was headed that way. He was wrong then, as he's wrong now.
You're still heading that way, Chris.
I'm opposed. I appreciate your vote then, Bob. I
don't live in your district.
I was one of the few places you haven't lived, Bob.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that our first priority be the weakest among us. And remember St. Paul's suggestion in the book of Romans that it is the obligation of the strong to accept the infirmities of the weak. I would also suggest that when you're dealing with budgets, they are in fact moral documents, and they reflect our concerns and our values. In the case of Social Security and Medicare, I think that we remain committed as Democrats to ensuring we keep our end of the bargain to provide for those who can least afford to have those services cut. I think it is frankly as simple as that.
Okay. go
I
ahead,
think
sir.
that's the same commitment that the Republicans have, and there's a way that you can reduce fraud and waste in both programs, again, by taking a look at them and
Sir.
having the will to do it.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. My name is John McKnight, and while the banter is very entertaining, I think that there's no doubt that our government is the most successful when the two parties work together, as opposed to spending so much time throwing mud at the other one. So my question to you is, Bob, I'd like you to tell us something sincerely that you're happy with that President Obama has done. And Chris, I'd like to ask the same question of you for Governor Kasich. Each tell us something good about the other guy. Thank you.
Well, I think, there's no question that we have to give him credit for getting Osama bin Laden and having the nerve to send the troops in, the SEAL force into Pakistan to take him out. I mean, that was a commitment that President Bush made to the American people, and President Obama accomplished that mission. So I will give him credit for that.
I'll offer two, if I may. I already spoke to the first, that Governor Kasich showed enormous political courage by pushing back against Speaker Batchelder and President Niehaus in his veto of a piece of legislation that would have largely unregulated, the removal of water from Lake Erie. I thought that was wise then. I hope he does the same now. Secondly, although I disagreed with him from a policy perspective, I thought Governor Kasich's strong advocacy for a massive tax increase on those who engage in fracking in Ohio, on the petroleum industry, for instance, that Terry Fleming heads. I think the fact that a Republican governor who ran for office as a fiscal conservative had the courage to stand up many times now and hold up that dime and said he wanted to increase taxes by just a dime on that industry, which would have resulted in billions of dollars in increased revenue for the state, showed an enormous amount of political courage for John Kasich to do. 2 dimes, I'm sorry, 20 cents.
Go ahead.
Which was, I think, Terry, you can correct me, the largest tax increase on the industry in the history of the state.
Our last question.
As a percentages, I think we ought to talk about it, but we also ought to talk about the fact that the tax increase proposed is still lower than any of the surrounding states on
So
the
it's a good
removal.
tax
And the other thing is that the amount of money that's going to be raised, instead of going to shareholders out of state, will be going back to the taxpayers in the state in a reduction in their income taxes.
We
So
made
that is
history.
good things.
We made history, Mike. It's
Well,
a good tax
We have
increase.
one more question to break history again. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Danny Robbins. Thank you for being here. As a leader, I'm always looking for more options, and as the issues on my plate get more dicey, the more options that I want. So I'm curious that so many candidates, mostly Republican candidates, have been willing to take pledges for no new taxes and why they would be willing to take those pledges.
Well, I think it's pretty simple. I think that we've gone along for years and years with the Democrats continuously to increasing taxes without any reduction in spending, without even eliminating duplicate programs. If you go through the government budget and understand that nobody in this room has ever read a federal budget, nobody has probably ever seen one, and I submit that most members of Congress have not read through the budget in detail either. So you do not even have an understanding of the duplication that's in some of the programs that are in the federal government. And one of the things that John Kasich is doing as governor is eliminating those duplicate programs in Ohio pretty rapidly. And I think we'll continue to do that. But if you're going to look for spending reductions before you look at tax increases, I think that you have to look at duplication of programs, and you have to look at the efficient delivery of the services that the federal government is providing, whether it's in the military or any place else. And I think that's one of the things that the Republicans have continuously preached, and that's one of the reasons why they signed these no new tax increase pledges.
Since the 1980s, there's been no tax increase that's been passed with Democratic support into law, broad-based tax increase passed into law, authored by a Democrat, signed into law by a Democrat since the mid-1980s under Dick Celeste, when he took Jim Rhodes's temporary income tax increase and made it permanent. Secondly, during the course of 2 years when Armin Budish was Speaker and Ted Strickland was the governor, we passed the largest tax cut for property taxpayers in the state's history. Third, there was no tax increase that at least Bob could enunciate when Al Gobble asked his question about which taxes were increased over the course of the last 3 years, broad-based taxes. None by President Obama. It's an old canard that is brought out every couple of years when the Republicans need to win an election. The Democrats somehow will raid your wallet. You probably still have Rex Alsace's old ad with the lockbox. Did Rex make that ad or somebody else? With Mark Weaver maybe, the lockbox on the wallet. It's a canard. It's make-believe. Maybe if he clicks his heels 3 times, he's going to Kansas. It's just not true. The fact of the matter is Ted Strickland authored, and with the support of Republicans, passed a bipartisan budget which included the largest tax cut for property taxpayers in the history of the state. And another fact, that the largest tax increase passed in this state was authored and supported by Republicans and signed into law by Republican Bob Taft. And a governor today could not sign that pledge that Grover Norquist brings out every couple of years because he's advocating a massive tax increase on those who are engaged in fracking in the state of Ohio and would not survive the scrutiny of Grover Norquist's pledge. To your point, they sign it because they have to survive the primary.
And with that,
And-
we have
and
to,
with-
Rich, they're all yours.
Thank you.
You missed me, didn't you?
No,
Hey.
You missed me, didn't you?
You know, the Metropolitan Club is always about, is always about civil discourse, and I think today was a good example of a very civil and somewhat humorous discourse. Thank you, gentlemen. I want you to make sure to sign up for next week when we're talking about revitalized urban core. The spring reception is Thursday of next week. Bring along some friends. Want to thank our sponsors, Ice Miller, Hannah News Service, the Jeffrey Company, and the Ohio Farm Bureau. Finally, thank you, Chris Redfern. Thank you, Bob Bennett. Thanks, Mike Thompson. Great program.